Welcome back to Tiny Grimes Games, and today I want to talk about sideboarding with humans. And specifically today what we're going to talk about is how to take a sideboard plan and apply it to a matchup. And so we're going to look at Tron and how does the sideboard plan you have affect how you defeat Tron. And what I mean by this is that it's not as simple as saying, okay, I'm playing against a matchup. I don't know really what the deck does, but my sideboard guide says it needs oofs and Gaddock Teagues in it. And that rings true for me because I know that deck has spells and artifacts. But it's not quite enough knowledge. Yes, maybe that will give you the best deck against the matchup that you're playing. But if you don't really understand the matchup itself, then that doesn't really give you enough information. Because let's say you draw an opening hand and it has a collector oof in it who says activated abilities of artifacts can't be activated, and you're thinking like, okay, this is kind of an iffy hand, but I've got an oof. And so you really need to understand that matchup. Do you need oof quick? Is it better on the play? Do you need it on turn 2? Can it be later? Is it a lockdown card? Like if you get oof out on turn 2, do you just win? Or is it just kind of like they've got a walking ballista, so I threw oof in there? So it's really important to understand the matchup, not just sort of blindly follow a sideboard guide. Let me take a quick step back from that. I love sideboard guides. I want to be clear on that. I think they are a wonderful tool for newer players, newer to an archetype, newer to a format. I've only been playing Modern about 2 months myself now. I've really put a lot of time into it this summer. But when I started, I picked up humans and I was like, I don't know at all what I'm doing. I don't even know what the other archetypes are. I have this handy sideboard guide that I would bring and pull out before every single match. And I often still do just because it's sort of habit now. I understand most of the matchups really well. I understand the deck well. I don't need a sideboard guide anymore, but it's nice to have it as like, for me, it's something to bounce ideas off of more than anything. And we'll get to that when we get specifically into Tron. But one of the goals, I think, is to move from being new to a deck and just looking at a guide and going, okay, it says I add these 3 cards and these 3 cards come out. Done. That's like first step, right? Second step is, why am I doing this? And then third step is, what is it specifically about this matchup? How does this matchup work? How do they win? How do I win? And how do these sideboard cards help me? So let's now zoom way into one particular matchup, and that is Tron. And one of the reasons, there's 2 reasons I'm picking this. One is Tron is really on the upswing. With the London Mulligan, it's kicking butt, and it's going to be here for a while. And then number 2 is this is exactly one of those matchups that I struggled with a lot and that I disagree with my sideboard guide on now. So let's go ahead and take a look at Tron. And the first step for me with Tron, like my first step with sideboarding was like, okay, my sideboard guide, I'm just going to read it now. It says I want to add 3 Damping Spheres, 3 Deputies, 2 Teagues, and oof. And I was like, okay, Damping Sphere's easy, right? You want to limit them to only 1 mana for each of their Tron lands. It's great. But I looked at oof, and I was like, oof, what the? Oof shuts down Walking Ballista, which is an artifact creature that needs to be able to activate to remove the counters to really do its damage. And it shuts down a couple of these like draw effects. And I was like, that's not that great. I mean, if I could stop them from playing Expedition Map, sure. But like I'd have to be on the play and get oof. And then they wouldn't be able to trigger it. And it feels like that's not that much. And then I saw Oblivion Stone. I was like, okay, it's a board wipe. But it's really only 2 cards. Like, it can't be that important. And the same thing with Gaddock Teague. I was like, okay, it shuts down Karn and Ugin. Yeah, I guess that's good, but it's not that amazing. Like, really, I'm going to sideboard it in for 2 cards and sideboard this other card in for 2 cards. And I did it because my sideboard guide said I should, and I just was a good little soldier and obeyed my sideboard guide. But that's not really enough, and it didn't give me much success against the deck. And so it wasn't really until I started thinking about what is it that this deck does that would then allow me to not just sideboard correctly, but make correct decisions. So let's take a look at what you're trying to do, what Tron's trying to do. So what Tron is trying to do, hopefully you understand the basics, that they are trying to get out their 3 Tron lands so that when they do, if they get the third one on turn 3, they'll have 7 mana on turn 3. Now that sounds bonkers, but to be honest, against our deck, 7 mana on turn 3 isn't actually as good as you would think it is. It sets up Karn, who is kind of terrifying. It can remove any target permanent, but all our target permanents are kind of the same against something like Tron. We're just trying to get in there and do a bunch of damage, so that's not super scary. What it does allow them to do is, if they already have an Oblivion Stone, well, I guess they can't. They would have to play the Oblivion Stone on 3, and then they still can't trigger it because they need 8, not 7. So 7 actually doesn't do a ton, but 8 is devastating. 8 is play Oblivion Stone, activate it, wipe the board. Play an Ugin, do its minus ability, wipe the board. So hopefully you're seeing a trend here that we basically have tell Tron's turn 4 to do one of two things. To either win the game with speed and pressure, or to have answers out to Ugin and or Oblivion Stone. Hopefully both, or just guess right. Okay, so the question then becomes, how do we do that? And the answer seems to be to move really fast, right? We can play our sort of typical human strategy. Play dudes, Stali's Lieutenant, buff them, get in there, kill them. Even if they get out something like a Worm Coil Engine or a Walking Ballista, hopefully we can Mantis Rider them over the top and finish them off. So that's sort of our strategy, but we can make some changes to be even better. So for instance, we can play Oof. And so the combination of Oof, Teague, and Meddling Mage gives us a bunch of answers that we wouldn't maybe normally have. Oh, I need to slide these over so you can see better. So if we can get some combination of these, we don't have to freak out as much that we only have till turn 4 to win. So if we get, say, Oof, we know that's handling Oblivion Stone, and then we can Meddling Mage on Ugin, and then we've got them both handled. If we draw Teague, we know Teague will handle Ugin, Meddling Mage needs to handle Oblivion Stone, and we have to have these pieces down by the time our opponent gets to their 4th turn if they have all their Tron lands. So essentially what I'm saying is that understanding the matchup allows you not only to know what sideboard cards are good, but to know when you need what and when you need to play what pieces down, right? If you have something like Meddling Mage, you don't necessarily have to play it on turn 2 if what you're going to be naming is Oblivion Stone and you're on the play anyway, because you can do it on turn 3 if you need to. So you can sort of sculpt these a little bit. But if you have both, say, Meddling Mage and Oof on turn 2, and then something else, it might just be good to play one after the other so you lock out both of the big things you're worried about. Okay, so now we're going to go next level. We've got sort of the basics of how we handle this matchup. There is one problem. I said we could kind of just do our humans things and blow them out before they get down, to that turn 4. They have one big problem for us, and that is Worm Coil. So let's say we lock out their really big things. They can't board wipe us now. The problem is a turn 4 Worm Coil Engine. Actually, a turn 3, right? Let's say they get their 7. It costs 6. They get 7. Turn 3. Remember, I said we're not super scared till turn 4. But turn 3 Worm Coil can come down, slow us down to where we thought we had the win, right? We're like, almost no matter what, we win. Karn only kills one guy. They play whatever, turn 4, we beat them before they get their board wipe, and then they go Worm Coil, and Worm Coil says, lifelink, right? So you attack with everything, they gain 6, you don't have enough to close out the game. Worm Coil ends up being this really, really destructive card. And so in my sideboard guide here, it says I should take out 2 Thalias, which is fine. I can agree with that. It says take out 2 Buglers. I can agree with that. This is a matchup where we have to win fast. We don't have a ton of time to be messing around. But then it says take out 4 Reflector Mages. And to me, this doesn't make any sense, because if the only card that stops our strategy of beating them before turn 4 is Worm Coil Engine, why would we take out the cards that beat Worm Coil Engine, right? So we're putting in Gaddock Teague to handle 2 cards. We're putting in Oof to handle 2 cards, I think we're fine leaving in Reflector Mage to handle the other card that beats us. And so to me, that's where just sort of blindly using a sideboard guide can get you in trouble, or just using heuristics, right? Because you just look at this deck and you're like, they got 7 creatures. They've got Ulamog, who doesn't come down forever. I'm not worried about this dude. Walking Ballista, Reflector Mage is nothing to, because it's going to be able to come in, you Reflector Mage, it reacts by killing whatever it's going to kill anyway. So you're really playing Reflector Mage for 1 creature. Obviously, you're not going to do that. My heuristics tell me I don't play Reflector Mage against decks that don't have creatures. That would just be ludicrous. But we just outlined that Wormcoil is a huge problem. So I'm not necessarily saying we should leave in all 4 Reflector Mages, but what I am saying is that we can't just use basic shortcuts to determine our sideboarding strategy, that we need to have a deep understanding of what is our opponent trying to do, how are we trying to engage with that, and then make our strategy from that. It could be argued that in my particular deck, where I have 2 deputies in the main board and 1 deputy in the sideboard that I can put in for this matchup, that maybe 3 of those is good enough for Wormcoil. I disagree. I leave in probably like 3 more Reflector Mages, at least 2. But the bottom line is, you can't just shortcut, you need to understand. So hopefully this video has sort of given you one step in this direction of how to understand how to use sideboard guides, how to sideboard as humans. The most important thing you can do, sit down with a deck, understand what it's trying to do, understand how you beat that strategy, and then understand how important those sideboard hate cards you are getting are. A good example of this is Hogak. If you're going to play Leyline of the Void, and you have a so-so hand with Leyline, you're keeping it because Leyline wrecks them. It's not quite the same with this deck in Oof. Oof isn't the card where you're just like, Oof and lands, boom, Oof, I win. No, not at all. It's all about pressuring this deck, and Oof just gives you one of those answers to the couple of problem cards they have. Okay, so hopefully you found this video helpful, and I'll see you next time on Tiny Grimes Games.